So welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you've watched a few of my recent videos, my recent adventures, you'll probably have noticed that I've been using my trusty little Nikon Z30 for a lot of my photography shoots. And for this evening's adventure, I wanted to have another photography shoot with the Nikon Z30 here in beautiful North Wales. Hello, Mr. Sheep. And have a little bit of a chat about why I've been using it and why I'm going to continue to use this quite a lot for my landscape photography. So if you're new to my channel, first and foremost, welcome. My name's Henry. I'm a full-time landscape photographer, and if you haven't gathered already, I don't usually use my Nikon Z30 for my stills photography. I've got a Nikon Z7, a full-frame camera that is absolutely fantastic. This isn't going to replace my Z7 altogether. I've just got a few plans going forward with my YouTube channel and with my photography that's actually going to require me to travel a little bit lighter. Oh man, don't you just love it when you get those patches of light out at sea? Absolutely beautiful. We're still a couple of hours till the sunset. Fingers crossed we can get some nice photographs with the Nikon Z30 this evening. Now, before I talk about this, let me talk to you about these lightweight plans that I've got. Basically, I've bought a bike and I'm gonna have a go at a little bit of bike packing. If you don't know what that is, if it's not obvious, it's backpacking but on a bike. So instead of strapping loads of stuff to your back, you strap it to your bike and you go as far as you want to for as many nights as you want to. You've got a tent with you, all sorts. Basically, I'm going to combine it with photography, and that is exactly why I'm starting to think a little bit lighter. I don't want too much weight on this bike for obvious reasons. So yeah, there'll be more of those adventures to come over the following weeks. But getting back to this evening's video all about the Nikon Z30, it's just made me realise how good this camera is for landscape photography, how capable it is, and I just wanted to share a few reasons as to why I'm so happy using this for landscape photography. And we'll do that amongst this mental wind here in North Wales. It is blowing a gale, but look at the views. You will not hear any complaints from me from this incredible landscape. I don't even care if we don't get any light, because this is phenomenal. So I'm just going to grab a quick shot of this beautiful looking scene here really. The only thing I'm trying to do is incorporate a little bit of foreground, and I found a nice little heather and common gorse mixture here. The yellows and the purples, the magentas are absolutely beautiful, because actually if you look off in the background, except from the sort of bluish tone that we've got in the water and the subtle greens of the hills, there's not much going on in the way of colour. So adding this down at the bottom of the frame is just going to help us to give a splash of vibrancy to the whole photograph. So one thing I love about my Nikon Z30, actually in comparison, a direct comparison to my Nikon Z7 Mark I, is I actually, even though this is a much cheaper camera, I mean, let's face it, this is what Nikon would brand an entry-level camera, although I hate them sort of things, but it's true. It is true. It's reasonably priced. It's a great way for somebody to get into mirrorless without spending thousands and thousands of pounds. But to get to my point, I don't feel like I miss out on any of the features of, let's say, a mirrorless camera. The Nikon Z7 is more expensive. It is a better camera, whatever that means. I suppose when I say that, I mean it's got a better sensor, better image quality. But in terms of the features, the menus, the interface, everything that I could do with this camera, as a stills camera and a video camera, by the way, I don't feel like I'm missing out at all. In fact, there are probably a few things with the Nikon Z30 where it's actually better than the Nikon Z7 features wise. Now that's probably just because it's a little bit newer, but don't feel like I'm missing out on any of the bells and whistles at all. So I'm just going to take this image handheld with the Z30 of the gorse and the heather and that beautiful scene off in the background. I'm going to shoot it as a vertical panorama, just try and keep as still as possible. And I'll sort of show you the shots that I'm going for here. I'm starting down here, obviously in amongst all of that beautiful colour. And then I'll probably take a second shot there, third shot there, fourth shot there, and I'll probably do another one as well, because if you look at that sky there, there's a lot of texture. As long as I don't overexpose, that is going to be beautiful, that sky, and I'll be able to bring out some of that detail in post. I'm shooting at f11, ISO is going up to 640, so that I can get a 1/100th of a second shutter speed. I'm making sure I keep an eye on my histogram, and I'll expose it for up there in the sky for the brightest part, and that's what I'm setting to for actually, 1/100th of a second, f11, ISO 64 like I said. That is exposed for the brightest part of this panorama, and then as I move down, it's going to be a lot darker, as you can see. Look how far that histogram shoots to the left hand side, but main thing is not to overexpose all that beautiful texture up there in the sky. So I've just realised I've told a bit of a porky there, because the only thing that I wish the Nikon Z30 had is a viewfinder. It hasn't got a viewfinder. I like using it. I do use the live view quite often, probably in tandem with the electronic viewfinder on my Z7, but I wish this had one. That's the only thing that it's probably missing, in my eyes at least. So if it isn't already proper obvious by everything that I've been chatting about in this video, another reason why I think the Nikon Z30 is brilliant for landscape photography, and this is probably the main reason as to why I've been using it more, is just because it's so small and compact and lightweight. And of course, I've got my reasons for why this matters to me. Generally speaking, if I'm being completely honest with you, I'm not usually that bothered about this sort of thing. If I have my Nikon Z7 and I have my Nikon Z30, yes, the Z7's bigger, it's bulkier, it's a little bit heavier. It doesn't bother me that much, but I did go on a hike quite recently just with the Nikon Z30 and this lens, the 24-200, in a little hip pack. And I tell you what, it was brilliant. I definitely noticed a difference. I didn't have this big bag on my back. I felt more nimble, I felt like I had more energy. And like I was saying in that particular video on that particular adventure, that's worth its weight in gold. To get to the top of a mountain, have a lot more energy because your camera and a lot of my other gear, in fairness, was a lot lighter. I just felt like I had more energy to give to my photography. And that can definitely only be a good thing. I love how lightweight the Nikon Z30 is and how small it is as well. Wow, this is such a cool spot, man, photography or no photography. I'll just do a little bit of a 360. Look at the views that we're getting. We've got vistas right back there to the Snowdonia Mountains, and then of course this coastline that we're on here, which is where the sun's going to be setting. But as you can see by the frigging cloud, it doesn't look really like we're going to get much of a sunset. Now, I have an idea for a photograph looking back towards the aforementioned Snowdonia Mountains, but I don't know if it's going to be a bit of a weird one. I might have to pull a few tricks out of my down jacket sleeves. Right, what I'm going to do here is use the telephoto end of the 24-200mm lens that I've got on here. I'm shooting at, let me have a look at these shots, something about 170mm right back in this sort of area here where we can see some of the distant Snowdonia Mountains, and then we've got one or two of the mountains here on the Clean Peninsula. I think they're called Eiffel, but the pronunciation is probably all over the gaff. But I like to give it a go. Now, a couple of things actually about the Nikon Z30 that I love. Again, probably in comparison with the Nikon Z7, but these are great. Couple of little things that I didn't really expect, because like I've been banging on about, this was just for weight purposes, this little change up. Firstly, because it's a crop sensor camera, my 24-200mm lens becomes much longer at the telephoto end. I guess it becomes, what are we talking here, like 24, 36 to 300, something like that. I've probably just butchered it, but it's something along them lines. And I love telephoto landscape photography. So to be able to have that extra reach on that end of the lens is absolutely brilliant. Yes, essentially it just means the image quality is a little bit worse because it is a cropped sensor rather than a full frame. And of course, another negative to this is we lose a little bit more on the wider end. But like I said, I love my telephoto landscape photography, so this for me is brilliant. So another thing that I love, and this one is a simple one. It's going to take me all of 2 seconds to show you, but this is massive. It's the worst thing about my Nikon Z7. If you watch me regularly, you'll know what this is. Not being able to get rid of all of this stuff on my screen. Whereas on the Nikon Z30, press one of the front custom buttons and bang, I've got a nice clear screen so that I can compose my photographs properly. Honestly, surely that can't be much to ask as a photographer. Just a nice clear live view so that I can compose without a load of nonsense all over my screen. So much better. So it's started getting quite dark now already. It's one of those evenings where there's so much cloud that it's almost as if the sun is setting a little bit earlier. So I'll have to get a little bit of a wobble on, but in at 170mm, like I said, right back towards those beautiful mountains back there. And I'm taking a couple of photographs. What we've got as probably the main subject of this photograph is a small little white cottage really far off in the distance. But like I said, we've got a lot of reach with this lens. I'm shooting at f11 ISO 100 and half a second. Of course, we're on the tripod here and I'm blocking any wind that's coming from behind us, putting the 5-second self timer on and then just letting it take the image. So we don't have to mess about with ISO or anything. Now, the only thing I'm worried about, but I'm trying 2 different compositions. I don't know which one is going to be better. That's the beauty of digital. Might as well take both of them. It makes no difference to my little SD card. They both feature the white cottage. One is probably even a little bit more zoomed in, just focused on certain mountains, whereas another one is a little bit wider, still very zoomed in, but a little bit wider, incorporating a few more of the mountains. I'll show you them both. Photograph 1, photograph 2. Let me know down in the comments which one you prefer. I think I'm going to prefer the one that's much more zoomed in, isolating the cottage. Oh, it's just started raining. I tell you what, it's a good thing my Nikon Z30 is weather sealed for landscape photography. So as I make my way back to the van, there's a couple more things about the Nikon Z30 that I wanted to talk about. A couple more reasons why I'm happy, I'm comfortable, I'm content in using it for landscape photography. And one of those things is the image quality. Now, when we're comparing it once again to the Z7, which is a full frame camera, a full frame sensor, of course the Z7 is better. But what this comes down to is something that we all hear over and over again, to the point where it gets a bit boring, but it is true. And that is, what image quality do you need personally? How far do you want to push it? Do you need 100 megapixels? Are you printing on big massive billboards? If so, 100 megapixels may be for you. But the majority of us, myself included, this is fine. This is more than enough. On top of that, the 24 to 200mm lens, it's not the sharpest Nikon Z lens that you can get. But for me, the maximum that I print is A2. And that is absolutely fine for me when I'm shooting with the Nikon Z30. And if you've watched my YouTube channel for a number of years, you'll know I used to shoot with a Nikon D70-200 not too long ago. I've only had my, not this, but my Nikon Z7 for a couple of years, and I was happy with the D70-200, but you may remember it fell in a lake. So then I just sort of upgraded to a full frame camera and got on with it. But I was content with the crop sensor from the D70-200 in the same way that I am with this. And this is the thing, yes, the Z7's better, the full frame sensor is better, but it's not a huge difference, it's not massive. Just from my own personal experience, yes, if I'm zooming into images in Lightroom, I'll notice that the image quality is better. But to be honest with you, I couldn't care less. This is brilliant because it's lightweight. It allows me to get on with what's more important, and that is taking photographs that mean something, storytelling with my images. I don't really care that much for a few extra megapixels. Oh mate, things got a bit grim. Things have got a bit grim out there, I have to be honest, but we're back now in the safety of the van. And before I leave you, there's one more thing actually about shooting landscapes with the Z30 that I really like, but it's a bit of an odd one. I think this is probably because I do photography for a living, but shooting with the Z30 really helps to keep me grounded, which is a bit odd, I know, but hear me out. What I mean by this is shooting with, like I mentioned before, this term entry-level budget-friendly camera really makes me feel good about how I portray photography to you, to my audience. I know I get a lot of beginners watching, and I absolutely love that. I love the idea that I'm inspiring people. So for me to be using, again, an entry-level camera, I think shows people that hopefully my photographs are all right when I use the Z30, but shows people that you can get you can get good photographs by using these cameras. It's not all about high megapixels and stuff like that, because I do get this gear acquisition syndrome where I go down rabbit holes and I'm mad for new gear, mad for new cameras and lenses. But then when I use something like the Z30, it's nice because I revert to where it all began almost, you know. And as long as you know how to use a camera, as long as you know how to get the best out of that camera and the lenses and the gear that you've got, I do feel like you can always get results. Because as far as photography is concerned, it's all about storytelling, and composition is pretty much everything. So that's the end of that. I'd love to know your experiences with shooting, you know, with, I hate saying it, but budget-friendly entry-level cameras and stuff like that. What's your opinion on it all? That would be proper interesting. Perhaps some of you use the Z30 or use crop sensor cameras for your landscape photography. Please comment below. I'd love to hear from you. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Please hit the old thumbs up button. If you can spare me one quick second, it does really help me out. And even more, what helps me out is hit the subscribe button. They're both free of charge, and yeah, it's a big help. I shall see yous on the next adventure. Out.